Welcome back. I have a true crime one this week. This is The Velvet Hammer by Chief Judge Belvin Perry Jr. and Amy Mitchell. So, Judge Belvin Perry Jr. was nicknamed the Velvet Hammer during his time as Chief Judge in Florida, so called because he had the soft ease of velvet in the courtroom, but also served justice hard like a hammer. In this book, co-written with Amy Mitchell, he talks about his varied life experiences, from growing up in a strict but loving household in the segregated South, to finding his way into law as a young African-American student and on to serving as a prosecutor, chief judge, private attorney, and beyond. He famously presided over the Casey Anthony case, which launched him into the public eye at the time, but he also worked on other capital murder cases and sought the death penalty in many cases too. In this book, he shares his life with his readers, as well as details of some of his most intense cases, including details of the Casey Anthony trial and also his view on the law, changes in the law, his profession, and why he believes in the death penalty. So I was drawn to this book because I felt like it has a different perspective than we often get as true crime readers. We often have books by journalists about cases or people, researchers, those kinds of professionals, podcasters, victims often write about their experiences. And we often get, we hear like legal stories, both fictional and non-fictional. But we less often hear from judges, and I just thought that was an interesting angle. It's sort of a job that I don't maybe know that much about, and I definitely don't have a perspective on that kind of experience. And of course, Judge Perry himself is an interesting person. So it's worth noting that while true crime makes for fascinating reading, it's not for everybody. This book talks about race and segregation, some truly tragic and violent cases, and the death penalty. So I don't think this will be surprising to readers of the crime genre, but it may not be for you if you were like not really expecting that kind of thing in a memoir. If you're reading this as sort of an interesting biography, it has some intense and uncomfortable, potentially, subjects. The book reads really well. It's very smooth and flowing, which means you may be up turning pages after lights out. But it's mostly structured very well, with famous cases being interspersed with chapters on Judge Belvin's life. It gets to Casey Anthony. That was if you're not trying to place it or whatever, that was a high-profile case. Casey was charged with her young daughter's death after she failed to report that her child was missing. So it's a really interesting, kind of disturbing case. So he gets to that pretty early on in the book, as well as some of the other better-known cases he worked on, like the Judy Goodyear Black Widow case. And then later in the book, he goes back into the Anthony case in great detail. And I mean, it was a case that launched him into the public eye and the one that he's most sort of well known for. But at times, I did feel like it was over-referenced. Like it feels redundant to bring that case up in chapters that were not directly about that. The cases are really compelling reading. I really liked the stories from his personal life as well. He grew up in the 50s. His father was one of the first African-American police officers, and his mother disappeared from his life one day, just really suddenly when he was very young, due to she had a mental illness. So, he's also blind in one eye from an injury obtained during a game of Robin Hood, played with real knives when he was 6. And when I read that, I just thought of all the things that, like, parenting has changed so much. And I'm not saying that in a looking back and judging way, but I just think of how much more protective we are of children as time goes on. And how many things we used to do that looking back, you're like, that wasn't really that safe. I really loved when he spoke about his father, who was clearly such an inspiring presence in his life and someone he looked up to. And I don't know, I just really loved those parts of the book. You can see how that relationship shaped his life and his character and his outlook. And because he worked in the legal system for his whole life and a long career. The book also details how he's seen the system change, the legal system. By that, I mean things like going from electric chair to lethal injection, or from having no women on the bench to more of them entering that arena, or changes in the law, things like that. So I just found that so interesting. I really enjoyed this perspective and learning about his life and his life experiences. So as mentioned above and a few times so far, he sought the death penalty in certain cases. And I think he spoke about this subject in his book really well. He's not really out to change minds or justify himself, but he explains how he was initially against it and then came to change his mind, and why he thinks it's the right sentence in the right case. And I do kind of wonder how I would feel about it if I presided over cases as a judge, or like was in the legal system for some of these murder cases, you know. I wonder how I would feel about it if, you know, I had that responsibility, and having seen the things that he's seen. Like, for me, so often there's such a remove between you and the subject that you're reading about, or even watching a documentary. Like, a lot of the time we don't have to look at the crime scene photos, or, we're not in the room with people that this has happened to, or who are perpetrators of crime. And that's not to say he's right or wrong, but I do kind of think, that might change your perspective or your opinion on things, if that makes sense. I just think it was interesting. He makes a case for capital punishment that I think is relatable, and he answers or acknowledges a lot of the arguments against the death penalty. So I'm not going to talk about what my opinion is on the subject, because I don't live in the US. So it's not really my place to publicly have an opinion about that, I think. And I've never lived in a country that has the death penalty either. So it just sort of feels a little bit outside of my jurisdiction. I don't know. But I think the way that he makes his points, whether you agree with them or not, they're just well reasoned and calmly put. And he's also not closed-minded to arguments against his opinion. And I think that's something I really respected when I was reading those chapters. He's not, I don't know, I just thought it came across really well. And I don't think it would be, if you would disagree with the death penalty, I don't think you would find his opinion offensive or uninformed, or sort of like a knee-jerk reaction or anything like that. On the whole, it's a read that I enjoyed. It is structured a little oddly. The back half of the book is very detailed on the Casey Anthony case, and I think that may have worked better to maybe have some kind of divide, like part 1, part 2, sort of like more generalized memoir, and then sort of have that, part 2, like this is just about Casey Anthony, that kind of thing. And just kept that memoir more focused in the first half, because obviously for some people picking up the book, they're here for the Casey Anthony stuff, and so I can understand them foregrounding some of that early on in the book, and I think that works really well. You get to that stuff quite quickly, but I just think maybe the structure doesn't ruin the book or anything. It's just something where I'm like, I could have just been tightened up a little bit, but it does feel well organized as you read it. It's maybe just not the ideal structure, but that aside, it's very interesting reading. You really get a sense of Judge Perry, and his own voice comes through really well. And while I don't agree with all of his opinions, I found myself liking him quite a lot. He's hardworking, honest, and principled, and he walks the talk. And I think that curiosity of mine about the different perspective of a judge presiding on murder and violent crime cases is really satisfied here. So it does what it sets out to do, and it delivers, and that's great. It's something different, and a good read about true crime, and also a good read about a fascinating life that he's lived. So this one is for you if you're a true crime reader, if you like books about law and the legal system, or if you were transfixed by the Casey Anthony trial and that's a case you're interested in. There's all great stuff there for you. It's a very interesting biography as well of a judge. So maybe if you're into biographies and you can handle the heavier stuff, then you'll like this. But yeah, I will say, maybe a trigger warning for some of you biography readers there. Overall, I really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely looking for more Amy Mitchell in the future. Yeah, so thank you to Post Hill Press and Amy Mitchell because she sent me the ARC of this book for review, and thank you for watching. You can check out some of my other videos. I also have another channel and socials, so you can find links below if you want more of that. And if you want to hang out again, remember to like and subscribe, and you can always leave a comment, let me know what you thought, or let me know what else you might want to see. Thank you.